Okay, Bismillah. Jazakallah khair for inviting me and having me down here. Inshallah, what I speak about today is of benefit. And if you have any questions at any point, please put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand as well if you'd like me to stop as I'm speaking, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah. So I thought it was important to just highlight some hadith and verses to set the scene. So we have a verse from Surah Al-Hujurat, which says, "O humanity, indeed we created you from male and female and made you into peoples and tribes so that you may get to know one another. Surely the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous among you. Allah is truly all-knowing and all-aware." What is the significance of this verse? So we often hear people saying that, Islam is colorblind, or there's no such thing as color, all these kind of things. But I would say this verse actually goes against that and says that, actually we were made into different peoples and tribes, so that we may get to know one another. And these differences that we have as Muslims, as people, in terms of where we come from, the different places we originate from, they're not negative things. These are differences which should be celebrated, and we shouldn't have to discount the fact they exist. If we go on to the next hadith, we see it says, "O people, your Lord is one and your father Adam is one. There is no favor over an Arab over a foreigner," or some translations say no superiority over an Arab, of an Arab over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab, and neither white skin over black skin nor black skin over white skin, except by righteousness, or some narrations, translation, piety. When we look, subhanAllah, when we look at this, when we look at this hadith and this message that is trying to embody, we understand that the message that's being conveyed to us is that, trying to contextualize in terms of what I said before, these differences, there's nothing wrong with having these differences and they should be celebrated. However, we shouldn't look at these differences, okay, I'm from this tribe, I'm tribal, I have this color skin or that color skin, and that should make you superior to another individual. However, it should be righteousness and piety that makes you superior to another individual. However, the pious person, the righteous person, because they are humble, because they are sincere, because they are genuine, they do not recognize themselves being superior over another individual. So even though they are superior because of the good character and good traits come to embody, they don't recognize that superiority within themselves. And I think when we reflect on that, I think it's really beautiful. The next thing is Allah Most High, next to these is Allah Most High has removed from you the pride of the pre-Islamic period and its boasting in ancestors. One is only a pious believer or a miserable sinner. You are sons of Adam, and Adam came from dust. That the people cease to boast about their ancestors. They are merely fuel in Jahannam, or they will certainly be of less account with Allah than the beetle which rolls down with its nose. So the point I want to bring into perspective here is that, just like we said, we have these differences and these things. Yes, they're important. Yes, there are things that define us, but the most important defining characteristics and attributes that we will ultimately be judged by is, were we pious believers or miserable sinners? These two dynamics, they come above everything else. And as Muslims, we should always remember that our faith and our principles and our values comes before any other identity. And these, being a Muslim and what we believe in, should be the converging point for any other type of identity and belief we have. And it should be the lens which we judge anything that comes our way, and should be the lens which we see through. And the last thing is that, "O you have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice. Witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents or relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony, refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is with what you do acquainted." Is ever with what you do acquainted, sorry. So this is just essentially putting the duty on us as Muslims to stand firmly in terms of to be just towards our fellow Muslims and to our fellow human beings, regardless of whether it's against your parents or relatives. This can be a hard thing when we're looking anti-blackness, racism, all these kind of things. And also maybe even harder than that is actually looking within yourself. Being honest with yourself. Did I say too much? Was I discriminatory? Was I racist when I said this? Did I treat this person properly? Have I been a good Muslim onto my brother and sister? Thinking about all of these things can be quite tough when you ask yourself these hard questions. When we look at Surah An-Nisa, it actually puts that responsibility on us to do this, and it's very important we do that. Okay, let's go to the next one. So, what does it mean to be black? I thought this would be important to discuss, just because obviously, we're looking at milestones, we're looking at anti-racism, anti-blackness, all of these kind of things that Black Muslims, milestones of Black Muslims, right? But if we don't know what the word black means, where it's originated from, how are we supposed to digest all of this information, all of this content? So the word black, typically in terms of when used to describe people, actually had originally sort of negative origins. It was discriminatory, it was derogatory. However, what you've seen is that it has, I guess you could say, been reclaimed. And also, the word black, it describes a sort of social or political heritage and consciousness that is felt by the people that come under that banner. In the UK, typically, it's used to describe, African Caribbean people. In the US, people that come under the banner of Black, African Americans, or people who may call themselves maybe Black Americans, but typically the words that are used there is African Americans, sometimes Afro Americans. So some people say, okay, why is it Black Muslim? Why do we call ourselves Black Muslims and not African or Caribbean Muslims? And one of the main reasons for this is that when you look at slavery, the sort of global, trade of captives and people, a brutal trade of captives and people from the African continent, specifically, mostly actually West Africa. When you look at the way, people are forcibly taken and exported around the world for profit, most of them were taken to Brazil, then America. Many of them were taken to the Caribbean, South America, Europe, Australia, South Asia. So Black people actually, even before that, people would be described as black people would be, they would migrate and travel all over the world. But slavery actually really pushed Black people all over the world. And what you found was that the people that were forcibly, captured and exported and enslaved were taken and placed in all these different places, but they still brought bits of their culture from where they originated from, and these things were passed down and passed down. But of course, they're now in a new place, and the culture of the new place that they're in mixed with the culture of where they came from, right? And this, I guess you can describe it as being a Black culture. In UK, you've got Black British as well. What you also find is that some people who do have originally their roots are in Africa or West Africa, South Africa, those kind of places, or the Caribbean, they don't affiliate with those places because they may be fifth, sixth, or seventh generation, meaning that it's their great, 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 grandfather or grandmother who was brought over here. So they don't actually know what it's like back there. They don't have a connection with it, but they do have a connection with the word Black. So I wanted to give you that understanding. But even when we look at typical, when we look at Arabic texts, classical Arabic texts, even back then, we're talking about the early sort of centuries, found that actually the word Black could be used in a derogatory sense even back then. So this phenomenon of sort of anti-Blackness and racism has existed for some time, and the label Black has been used in different ways. So I just wanted to give you a bit of that background, inshallah, because I think as Muslims it is important, that we have an understanding of our faith and the history of how our faith came to be and how we as Muslims as a community have gotten to where we are today. I think it's also important we have an understanding of what's going on around us, so we're able to relate to the people around us. So terms for dark and black in classical Arabic texts. So Adam, so this means dark or very dark, and it was said that in classical Arabic texts that somebody who was Adam was very asma, so very dark or very brown, right? There's akhdar, which is another word for dark, asmar, which is dark or brown, Asma al-Lawn, which is brown colored, and Aswad, which is black. So there's different labels for black and dark. So I wanted to go through some of the prophets, may peace be upon them. So I think it's, people don't always know that there are prophets who would be described as black, or who were described as black. I think the first one is Adam alayhi salam. Like I said, he was actually described as being very dark, right? The complexion of earth is also another translation or narration of what his name means. And so he was the first prophet and the first man. And again, many Muslims don't know that he was very dark in complexion and would be described as black. Musa alayhi salam. So Musa alayhi salam, he was actually described as being, as when the Prophet saw him, he said that he was actually as dark as the two darkest Arab tribes. And he was described as being, again, extremely dark. So it's very, very dark. And again, some people, I'm still going to go through some prophets to come. But some people say, okay, yes, we have some prophets who are black. Why is this an issue? And it's important to note that, we have people today, sadly, in our community and also outside of our community, who look down on their fellow believers who are black or who are dark skinned. And the point to reinforce to them and to the rest of the community is that if you have a problem with your black brothers and sisters, would you have a problem with black prophets or very dark prophets? And it's really questioning and challenging the ignorance and the racism and discrimination that we have within our community and beyond. So Sulaiman alayhi salam biblically is described as being, again, black or very dark. And we know he's one of the wisest prophets that we have within our tradition. So Isa alayhi salam, there's actually conflict between in narrations, and there's actually, good narrations have actually conflicted on this. He's been described as being white at times, and also being dark or black. So there's conflicting terms around this, but the notable narrations have actually said both. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and with this, so he himself was not described as being black, but he was described as being sort of brown with a red hue. But what I want to say is actually the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, actually comes from black heritage. So Hajar, who was the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, she was formerly a slave, and she herself was black, and obviously started a whole lineage of prophets. And so yes, we actually he actually descends he descends from a black woman. And so again, this idea of blackness and black people being on the periphery or being outside of Islam is not true. They played very integral parts, like people from all different sort of backgrounds and colors also played within the establishment of Islam. So male and female companions, so Ayman, so she was the essentially the surrogate mother of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when his mother passed away at a young age, and she took care of him and she nurtured him. And it's said as well that if there's a hadith which says that if somebody wanted to marry one of the people of paradise, they would marry Ayman because of her character and her steadfastness when it came to caring for the Prophet, peace be upon him, and also for establishing and helping to establish Islam. The next one is Sumayya. So a lot of people perhaps don't know that Sumayya was again, she's the first martyr of the Muslims, and she was described as being, again, extremely dark and having kinky hair. She had a very resilient character, very strong-willed and strong-minded. And when her and her family, Ammar, which is her son, and Yasir, were being tortured by the Quraysh, the Prophet, peace be upon him, would pass and say, "Patience, patience, O family of Yasir, paradise awaits you." And there was so much respect for her as an individual that the Prophet, peace be upon him, would refer to her son as Ammar ibn Sumayya, not Ammar ibn Yasir, because of her character. Pardon me, sorry. Because of her character and her resilience. And so much so that, when Abu Jahl was passing them, the family of Yasir was passing Sumayya, he taunted them and taunted her, and she wasn't having this, and she replied back, and Abu Jahl was very embarrassed of this, and he thought, his honor had been challenged essentially, and so in a fit of rage, he stabbed her violently, and then she was martyred on the spot, and she's the first martyr within out of the Muslims. So Bilal ibn Rabah is somebody we know. I think everybody kind of, if you were to ask somebody, can you name a black Sahaba, everyone would go to Bilal. And he was the first person to be able to call the adhan. And one thing that really inspires me about him is that when he was being tortured by the Quraysh, he had such formidable character. He was so steadfast on the message that when he was going through all sorts of painful torture, which was pushing him psychologically, physically, mentally, spiritually, he kept saying one thing, ahadun ahad, ahadun ahad. Like, he was so strong on the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he wouldn't renounce the message no matter what the Quraysh did to him. He was so strong on it, and he wouldn't let go. And he's somebody, again, who is really inspiring for me, and I think is an inspiration for us as Muslims. Okay, sorry, next one. So Abu Dar is again, another Muslim of high-standing character. He himself, so interesting thing is that he himself, again, as we know, he was black. He was described as being black, but he did not come from slave lineage like Bilal did. And there was actually a day that Abu Dar actually went to Bilal, and when they were angry, I don't know, I think there was a dispute between them, and he actually said, you son of a black woman, right? But they're both black, but because Bilal is from slave lineage, there was an extra connotation there. And Bilal, radiallahu anh, was very, very upset, and he ran to the Prophet ﷺ and he told him what happened. The Prophet ﷺ actually came back and admonished Abu Dar, and Abu Dar was so upset as well himself when the realization of what he had done and what he had said came over him. He cried and cried and cried, and he begged for forgiveness from Bilal, and through that they made up. But he's known to be somebody of high-standing moral character. When he first accepted Islam, he was so confident of the message that he went to the Kaaba and he proclaimed the fact he's a Muslim. And in those times, with the Quraysh around, that was not, an easy thing to do. And they beat him and they beat him and they beat him. He went away. He came back the next day. And he did the same thing. He proclaimed the message of Islam, that he's a Muslim. They beat him and they beat him and they beat him. He left and he did this again. After successive times of doing this again, it just showed how strong on the message he was. Again, this was a time where you couldn't just profess that you're a Muslim. You would get tortured and beaten, but he was somebody who didn't care. He wanted to share this. The Prophet ﷺ was watching this, and he said, he told him that I want you to be someone who helps spread this message to your people and to others. So this is one that people don't actually know about. So Ali radiallahu anh, people don't know that in many different texts actually, and this is something I was really surprised to read. And although I go through it in the books I get it from, I'm gonna sort of speak about it later on. I'll give you the resource, but it's called Centering a Black Narrative, Black Muslim Nobles Amongst the Early Pious Muslims. It's written by Ahmad Mubarak and Dawood Walid, and all of the references that I've spoken about you can find in here, inshallah. But Ali radiallahu anh was actually described as being extremely dark. Not even just dark, he was described as being extremely dark. And I don't even need to go into the wisdom within his words, the way he protected the Muslims and the way he allowed our deen and our faith to be preserved up until now. And of course being one of the four rightly guided cliffs. So yeah, those are just a few. There's many, many more. Of course, there are thousands and thousands of Sahaba. So I've just named some of the notable ones that all of us will probably know, inshallah. Okay. So just to go through, I've split this actually between kind of wanting to give practical tips. I know it was speaking on Black Muslim milestones, but also wanted to take this opportunity to give practical tips for us as Muslims on how we navigate the issue of racism and anti-Blackness within our communities and beyond. So, but before, I still go through the history bit. Usman Dan Fodio and Nana Asma were um, Usman Dan Fodio. He was a military leader. He was a writer. He was a scholar. He was a wise person and a guide within the northern Nigerian region, the region we now look at as northern Nigeria. And what he did was he united the sort of tribes and the groups within northern Nigeria who were practicing a mixture of Islam and paganism. And in his study and in his writing, he wanted to re-establish the concept of Tawheed, and he wanted to take these extra elements away from the people that were in the area. And so he went around sort of ridding them of oppressive leaders, because there were many oppressive leaders at that time in the area, wanting to unite them under one body. And he actually founded the Sokoto Caliphate at the time. He himself, he's written over 100 books in Hausa, which is an indigenous language in the northern Nigerian region, which is actually, it's got bits of Arabic in it as well, and also in Arabic as well. So he wrote hundreds of texts. So that's something notable about what he did. And his daughter Nana Asma is still a revered figure today in northern Nigeria, and was known for strongly encouraging and leading education for women and girls in the region. She would use poetry and also her knowledge on medicine, and also religion as well, to educate women and girls in the area. She founded a group of women who would go around to people's houses and teach the women and girls. And I think this is really important, especially in our day and age, where there are numerous statistics which show that women and girls often have less access to education in various parts of the world. This is important. Islam, when we look at strong figures within our religion, within our tradition, I've named some of them who are women. Aisha radiallahu anha is another one. I think we can think to, educating women and girls is a very important thing, and Nana Asma was a very, very key and crucial figure who did that. She also actually at the time would advise scholars, she would advise military leaders, and she would advise the caliph that came after her father. So there's something of note. So I think a really important one that we also think of is Malcolm X, and I think there are so many quotes out there and so many stories. His autobiography is also a really good one to read, which shows his character, shows the journey that he went through. He was somebody who, he went through being a criminal, being somebody who engaged in very immoral acts. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided him to the truth. Before he got to the truth, he was part of a group called the Nation of Islam. I don't know if any of you know about them. But they had this belief that, white people are devils, and that, black people are sort of, like their God is black, essentially. Yeah, we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above any of these labels that we have, that we use for people, right? But this was what he believed in. However, when he began to interrogate the beliefs he held and the beliefs that the Nation of Islam held, and the ways they behaved, he realized that no, this isn't the truth, and he embarked on the Hajj pilgrimage, and on seeing the way Muslims of different colors, backgrounds, ethnicities, and nations came together. He came to realize that no, actually, Islam, Sunni Islam, is the truth. Alhamdulillah, he died upon Islam, and his sincerity and his constant questioning of self and self-improvement, and wanting to push himself to what the truth was, I think is something. It's an example for all of us to follow. He has this quote which I really love, which says that if I made any mistakes, please know I made them while being sincere, and that I was sincerely wrong, essentially. And I think this is a time, the brother said in the beginning that we should all renew our intentions as to why we're here and to what our purpose is. And I think that's very important and very true. the figures I've named up until this point are individuals that consistently did that, and they were able to make a great change in society through doing that. And again, all of us, we don't have to be on TV. We don't need to be getting thousands of views into for every Muslim to know our names. That's not uh, what I'm sort of advocating for here. But if you can make a difference to one person, that is a massive, massive difference. And we should honestly really keep endeavoring to be sincere, to look within ourselves, to challenge things we're seeing in our society so that we can actually make a change one step at a time. Okay. Okay, so these are just some contemporary Black Muslim scholars in the West of note. You may not follow all of them or, be behind everything they say, but I think they have made a serious difference to the condition of Black Muslims worldwide in terms of the respect they have gained and the output they are putting out. So Imam Dawood Walid is one I've spoken about. He's got a book called Sacred Activism, which actually gives a framework for Muslims on how they can engage in the social political sphere in a principled way that puts our faith first. Imam Amar Shukri, he's actually come to a few FOSIS conferences actually. He's a poet and he's a scholar himself, who again gives very, I think, very reasoned and measured takes on social issues that are happening within our society. Dr. Sherman Jackson, again, is another example of, he's a bit older than the two I've just mentioned. Again, it gives very reasoned and measured commentaries of social issues, especially racism that's going on in our society. Imam Zaid Shakir is another notable one as well. Imam Siraj Wahaj himself, so he's a traditional Sunni Islamic scholar now, Imam Siraj Wahaj, but he was actually part of the Nation of Islam before. So he's gone through that journey of changing his mind and changing his intentions, and that journey of coming closer to the message and embarking on truth. And I think when he speaks and when he's delivering his commentaries on different issues, you can literally just feel the sincerity, the wisdom, and the experience that's coming through in what he's saying. Then there's also Sheikh Abdullah Aduro and Imam Warithdin Muhammad, so so the last scholar who's actually passed away now. Imam Warithdin Muhammad was actually the son of, so within the Nation of Islam, there was a man called Elijah Muhammad. Someone, within their group, they'd call him the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And astaghfirullah, he said that he was a prophet, right? He said he's the prophet of God. This was Elijah Muhammad. Imam Warithdin Muhammad was his son. And when Elijah Muhammad died, he passed on the leadership of the Nation of Islam onto Imam Warithdin Muhammad. But at this point, Imam Warithdin Muhammad was not a Sunni Muslim, but he had so much, he had such a discomfort with the Nation of Islam and the message they were putting out. He didn't believe in it, and he also, within the Nation of Islam, there was also fraud, there was fraudulent behavior, there was money-making schemes, business schemes, all these kind of things that were going up within the leadership. And this didn't sit well with him. So he actually broke off. And for a while, the Nation of Islam, under his leadership, was a Sunni Muslim organization. And he converted, subhanAllah, tens of thousands of Muslims through his act, through what he did. And it was very courageous act because of what he did, there were people that wanted him killed. They wanted him exterminated because he made the organization fragmented. And so, the sacrifice he made, I think he died early, I think 2003, early 2000s. Again, there was a split and the Nation of Islam continued to do what they were doing, but he brought so many people to Sunni Islam. So he's someone really notable to mention. Okay, I was going to have a quick break, but I think we should be fine for time. There's about 10, 15, 20 minutes left, inshallah, so we should be good to continue. I want to leave a bit of, 5, 10 minutes or so for questions, inshallah. So, where are we now? I mean, this isn't necessarily, just things happen to Muslims, but Muslims are affected by these. Why have I put these pictures? We've got different issues that are going on here. We've got Boris Johnson, he's described Black people as having watermelon smiles and looking like pickaninnies, essentially speaking, saying racist tropes. Donald Trump, he's called African countries, by derogatory names. He has encouraged white supremacists to attack minorities and black people. On the left here, sorry, on the left here, we've got Mark Duggan, who was fatally shot by police in 2011 because they thought he had a gun when he didn't. We've got Sandra Bland, who was a victim of police brutality in America. When we go to the right here, we've got people dressed up in blackface. But this is in Dutch, it translates to Black Pete. So they have a whole celebration where they have marches and games, which is essentially making fun of slavery and its how to explain it. It originates from a legend and a myth, which makes fun of a slave within their sort of folklore. And so again, blackface is something that mocks black people, and it comes from a history of mocking black people, mocking slavery. So that's something there. You've got police brutality and slavery, all of these things, when things happen in the past, look, when we look at our tradition as Muslims, the journey of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the journey of the Muslims, how they were able to preserve our deen so that we are able to practice today. We know that the past has implications on now. So when we look at slavery, when we look at issues, whether it be 10, 20 years ago, hundreds of years ago, it has effects till now because these experiences are still passed down generations. So what are the points we can focus on as Muslims when we look at, the struggles of our Black Muslim brothers and sisters? So it's important to take the issue seriously. I think that just speaks for itself. We shouldn't be, denying that, oh, this is an issue, or it's not something that's that serious, or it's not something that happens within our ummah or the rest of society. It's important we take these issues seriously so that we can find solutions to them. Again, these solutions should be from an Islamic perspective. But if we, continue to deny the issues that our Black Muslim brothers and sisters are facing, it's going to create further divides in our community. Be careful on what you speak on, and research first before speaking in depth on topics. This is I think very important. Imam Malik, radiallahu anh, he was asked, I think, 50 questions or quite a few questions by one of his students. And I think it was Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, I can't remember which of the two. But he said, I don't know about, maybe it was like 46 times. He said, I don't know so many times. I don't know. And the wisdom behind this is that one shouldn't give definitive answers on things that they don't have knowledge upon. Sadly, when we look at social media, when we look at all of these things, it's given people a massive platform to speak on things they have not researched, they have no prior knowledge upon. And it can be very dangerous because there is, I went to a class, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know who this quote comes from. I know it's one of the four great Imams, but I can't remember which of them it is. But, when somebody has no knowledge of an issue, they will come up with very strange opinions, right? And we see this, people come up with very, very strange opinions when they haven't actually researched what they're speaking upon. So really think, and even if you do have knowledge on that issue, you need to think about, is it my place to speak on this issue? If it's not my experience per se, or I'm not somebody who goes through this on a day-to-day. Again, I don't agree with this thing of you shouldn't have an opinion. Everybody has a right to an opinion. However, it takes wisdom to understand that if I am to assert my opinion here, is this going to be the wisest thing to do, and is it going to be about benefits? So something important to think about. So seek advice on activities or solutions you wish to follow. It's important to seek advice before we take very monumental steps, or even little steps sometimes, especially when it has an effect on other people. The advice we seek should be those who are experienced in the area. Sometimes it may not be a scholar that you ask advice. It may be a community leader or somebody who has experience on the specific issue you're dealing with. But it's always important to ask advice, especially if it's affecting a wider group of people. Be empathetic and understanding, practice emotional intelligence. The Prophet, peace be upon him, used to listen to the problems of many individuals. Muslim and non-Muslim, by the way, and he treated people fairly with the prophetic wisdom. And it's this wisdom and this emotional intelligence that we should try and embody in ourselves, in our community, and we should try and practice in our everyday lives. So don't be arrogant, entitled, or condescending. These are some of the, I think, some of the worst traits we can see in people. When we look at Iblis, when we look at him, the first sin that was committed by Iblis was not actually shirk, because he did not disbelieve. He believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he was arrogant. It was kibr, right? He thought he was better than Adam, right? He thought he knew better, and it's that arrogance, right? And it's why we see this hadith being said of, if you have a mustard seed's worth of arrogance, you will not be inside the garden. Why? Because arrogance is such it's an emotion that can be so poisonous. It can affect people around you so terribly, right? It can have monumental effects, which is why it's so important that we suppress it and we work on ourselves. And like the brother said, you keep renewing your intentions so that you can check your ego, so that you can check any arrogance you may have, and you can rid yourself of it. This entitlement that comes with arrogance and this condescending character trait that comes with it, again, it comes back to some of the things I was saying before. Do you feel an arrogance and entitlement that I have to contribute to every single conversation? I must be the one to speak. I must be the one to pass judgment. Me, right? I am the most knowledgeable, right? I am the one who knows best. All of these kind of feelings, again, when we're looking at these wider social issues, it can have detrimental effects. So it's important to check ourselves. Speak to your family, friends, and parents. I've emphasized the importance of that before. Sorry, I'm just checking. Okay, yeah, I was just checking some of the questions if there were any. So speak to family, friends, and parents. Right. So this is very, very important. Something, speaking to your parents, especially, I think we all know this can be a challenge. I think we have to practice a bit of tact when doing this. When we sort of start to scold our parents or tell them off, we know they don't like this. So it's important we don't do this. And our parents are parents, so we need to exert a level of respect to them as well. So perhaps if you hear them saying something problematic or something wrong, something you can do is sometimes the way I'll go about it is that I'll just note it down mentally or on a piece of paper, for example, and then I will bring it up later when they're in a better mood. Perhaps I will not bring up that exact same instance, but I'll bring up the surrounding sort of instances and situations so that we can still find a way to talk about that issue. If you really want to speak to your parents about something, perhaps do some chores or do something that is going to put them in a better mood before you speak to them. Just be strategic, do it in a way which is respectful, but also challenges them, challenges the way they think. Because again, it's a duty on us to improve the people around us, especially our parents, our relatives, and ourselves, like the verse says. So encourage your imams, scholars, masajid, ISOPs, and Muslim organizations to tackle this issue and to not condone racism and to actively fight against it. We have to look at these things on a case-by-case basis. As every one of us on here is going to be a leader in some sense, whether it's a leader amongst your siblings, a leader amongst your friends, a leader amongst the ISOP community, a leader in your masajid. Wherever we are, we will all be leaders in some way, shape, or form. And when we are in those positions, and even when we're not in a position of leadership, we still, like the ayah says, we have a responsibility to not condone these things, to actively fight against it, and to stand firm, to stand strong. There's a hadith which really sticks with me when I feel perhaps the opinions of people or the fear of kind of pushing against what people are doing is residing within me. And it talks about how there will be, on the day of judgment, there will be a person who will be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will ask him, there were these people who are backbiting at this time. Why didn't you stop them? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to say the reason why you didn't stop them is because you feared them more than you feared me, right? And subhanAllah, I think that is so profound in that, I understand when we're speaking to people, when we're challenging people about these things, You can get anxious, you can get scared, how are they going to react? I don't feel equipped, or all these kind of things. But we must remember that we shouldn't allow the fear of people to to override the fear of what is right, of doing what is right, to override the fear that we have for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we are in these positions and you have that sort of, it's kind of like the anxiety in your chest, your heart's beating a bit faster when you're about to say something which may be a bit controversial, or may upset, or cause an issue with those you're speaking to. Remember that, renew your intentions. That, why am I doing this? What's the reason I'm trying to do this? I'm trying to do this for a good cause and a good reason. I'm trying to do this because ultimately it's right, for me as a Muslim to do this. It's a duty for me as a Muslim to do this, right? So that's what we should keep in the back of our minds. And let us bring the verses in Hadith, in the verses in the Quran and Hadith that we have in our tradition to life. We really need to do this, right? Some people, sadly, sometimes they may use verses or Hadith to, they may use it to deflect, issues that are being spoken about in the community, or they may say, Bilal radiallahu anhu was black. The verses in Hadith and the people within our tradition being black, these things are true. The word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know is true. The Prophet, peace be upon him, his last sermon, where he speaks against racism, mind a lot of anti-racist movements, maybe we can trace them as far back as 400 years ago. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was speaking against racism 1400 years ago. So he was so far ahead of the curve, right? And that's the wisdom of our faith and our religion, right? We know these things are in our tradition, but Islam actually, this is something I read and I heard, and it really stuck with me. Islam itself didn't end racism. It didn't end all these different types of discrimination. It commanded us as the Muslims to do it. And that's something we really need to keep in mind. And lastly, so make dua for oppressed black communities around the world, and make dua for the youth to be able to unite upon Islam, and to really be to be tight as a community. This hadith of, when one part of the body hurts, the whole part of the body feels fear, or it's hurting as well. Let's actually bring that to life, and that when we see our black Muslim brothers and sisters suffering or going through something, going through racism, we relate to them, we want to support them, we want to protect them, and we want them to feel part of our faith and our ummah. So just some resources I think you should also read. So this is Centering the Black Narrative. This is the one where I've gotten a lot of this information from. It's a really good read, but all of the resources there, all of the references there that you can draw from. There's also Black and Muslim in Britain. It's a YouTube series that you can find. I actually starred in season 2 of this series as well. It gives you quite a comprehensive and holistic kind of understanding of the Black Muslim experience in Britain. And it's got 2 seasons which you can really delve into. And I think it's very authentic in terms of how things are portrayed. Autobiography of Malcolm X, transcribed by Alex Haley. I would specifically get this autobiography. There's different ones, but I think this I found to be the best one. Again, it really goes into detail the journey Malcolm X and actually went through, and I really encourage you to read it. So the African Caliphate, the life, works and teaching of Sheikh Usman bin Fodio by Ibrahim Suleiman. Again, this really goes into a lot more detail than I've been able to do so here, of the life, the works of teaching of Usman bin Fodio, and how he was able to unite so many different types of people. Because I think a lot of people think of the African continent as just being, one massive, place where there's not many differences. But even within, Nigeria now, you've got 350 to 400 different ethnicities and sort of languages there, right? So there's so much diversity and variety, and he was able to unite so many different people underneath the banner of Islam. So I think you should really sort of have a look into him. Reports and surveys. There is the Black Muslim Forum survey of 100 Black Muslims in the UK, which looks at their experiences. I really encourage you to type that in on Google and to read into it. There's also some, people have spoken about their ISOC experience in there as well. There's Muslim Census, which has gathered data of 250 young Muslims who are under 25. They're not all Black Muslims. I think they're actually non-Black Muslims, or Muslim, Asian, Arab, and sort of different backgrounds, right? And it's gathered their experience and their understanding of what anti-Blackness is. There's some really stark and saddening stories in there, but I think it's very important that we as a community are sensitized to these things and we read upon them. And now we come to questions. So Jazakallah khair for listening to me. I try to sort of touch on the main things and get the main message across. May Allah guide us to what is right. May Allah allow Ummah to unite upon what is right as well. I mean, any questions at all? Sorry, NA, you asked, could I go back to the last slide so you can take a picture of it? Which slide? Okay, would you be able to name a few more Black Muslim heroes from our history off the top of your head? Maybe that I can do some research into them, inshallah. I guess so. There's Mansa Musa, I think, is one a lot of people like to look into, being one of the richest men. I think he's the richest man to ever exist. And there's also his brother. I've forgotten his brother's name. Other ones I'm trying to think of. Off the top of my head, I can't name everybody. I think I named quite a few, to be honest with you. There are definitely more. There are, for example, there are actually many Black Muslim slaves. So actually, one thing I wanted to put into this presentation, but I didn't have time to, I don't want to make it too long, was that actually there are a sizable amount of number of Black Muslim slaves who were brought over to different parts of the world, especially America, and they tried to forcibly convert them. And there were a sizable number of them who actually resisted conversion. Again, I don't know all of their names. There were some of them, again, we don't have their names, but you can search into that in terms of a concept, in terms of Black Muslim slaves that were enslaved and taken across to America, but were still able to practice. A lot of them were sort of offered better treatment if they converted to Christianity and stopped speaking Arabic, but many of them actually still kept to their faith. So that's something to look into. There are, I mean, if you look at, there's in different sort of American liberation movements, there were Black Muslims who took part in groups like the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Movement that I could sort of go through. But the reasons I specifically picked on these ones were because their primary lens of operation was through Islam. I think that is very important in the day and age that we live in, because there are all sorts of ideologies and different things going around, which different people get sucked into. But the ones I picked there were people that their moral compass, their social compass, their political compass was Islam. And that's the example I wanted to essentially set for all of you today. I mean, yeah, there are a few more, but I would rather focus on these ones. But I could find some more names as well. But I think I went through quite a few from history and from contemporary examples as well. Okay, so with the practical tips, one of the things you mentioned was speaking to your circles, masajid, etc. I know, no, don't apologize. I know some people feel like it's always Asians and Arabs in ISOC, or like some masajid are full Asians and Arabs. What specifically in that instance? Okay, so one really big thing is food. And this is something we speak about in our FOSIS anti-racism trainings. And a lot of people would say, food is a trivial thing. However, food is, when you go to any social event, when you go to any massive event, a wedding, a gathering of people, food is always something everybody's looking forward to. It's something that eases tensions. It's something that brings people together. So food actually is a very important thing. When you go to a lot of events, you find that it's always biryani and stuff, which personally I love biryani, but my point that I'm trying to make is that when you purely only have these foods, you actually exclude other people from other cultures. And it's one of those subtle things that makes sort of Muslim culture or ISOC culture or, mosque culture synonymous with perhaps Asian culture. So having food from other backgrounds, so Somali food, Nigerian food, for example, attracts people from different cultures and makes them feel a lot more at home. These are some subtle things that can be done. Another thing I think is having in the halakas that people run and the circles that people run, actually have discussions that are centered around racism, that are centered around, it doesn't even need to be just racism in the Muslim community, but in wider society, these understandings are very important. Like you said, yeah, some leaders have said, they thought biryani was a Islamic dish. I think that'd be very easy for people to get that image when it's something that is served at all of these events. So it's very simple things, in ISOCs and masajid, different places, when I think something that happens at socials, for example, is that you get clusters of people who are just from the same culture speaking amongst themselves. And again, this in of itself is not a bad thing, an evil thing. But however, when you get other people who perhaps they try and come to the ISOC and they don't see too many people mixing, or they don't feel welcomed, and they don't see people from other cultures making an active effort with them, trying to relate to them, trying to connect with them. This again, it's one of those things that again, it wasn't done with any malicious intent, but it still starts to cause these divides that were, it furthers the divides we see in our community. So those are just a few things, inshallah, I would say. Any more questions at all? I'd say I've got 5 more minutes left. So. Okay. Okay, bismillah. If there's no more questions, I'll just put I've got a sort of my Twitter kind of work account for any of you guys who have Twitter and want to sort of get in touch with me. This is my work account. I'll just put it there, and then I'll put my email address that you can contact me on that process as well, inshallah. So if you want to, continue these conversations, or you have questions you want to ask, please email or get in touch with me, inshallah. I may take a bit of time to do so, but yeah, feel free. So last question I'll ask there is what dish from your own culture you recommend? So being Nigerian, I think the biggest dish I'd recommend is jollof rice. I don't know if anybody has had the privilege to try it. It's a bit spicy, so for some of you that can't handle spice, I think tread carefully. But alhamdulillah, we had it. We had an iftar at UCL, which is the ISOC I come from. We had it, I think, about 2-3 years ago now. And it was really nice. It was an open iftar for people from different backgrounds and who just wanted to learn about Islam as well. And everybody enjoyed the rice and the chicken, even though they were very spicy. So yeah, I'll end it there, inshallah. But jazakallah khair, everybody, for listening to me and for inshallah levels of benefit. If you've got any feedback or criticism, again, please email me, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair for that, Brother Ayo. Mashallah, that talk was very informative, considering the times that we're living in, subhanallah. And I hope everyone else enjoyed and was able to benefit from that talk. And again, Brother Ayo, we really appreciate you jumping on the Zoom to come and talk to us. And you are always welcome back, bi'idhnillah. Hopefully, in a physical setting next time, inshallah. And maybe we could switch it up with the food, and we should, inshallah, bring some jollof rice, 100%. We ask Allah to accept our efforts, and we ask Allah to allow us to gain beneficial knowledge and be able to implement it into our lives. And we ask Allah to make us firm believers of His religion. Ameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.